Hi there, welcome back to another video lesson. This is again your instructor, Mr. Ronilo H. Palingkad, and I'd like to welcome everyone. I'd like to thank everybody for spending time with me today. So again, this is another video, sort of a continuation or a follow-up lesson of what you guys had worked out on Google Forms, right? If you can recall, it was an activity about communication barriers, also causes of communication breakdown. But before we start off, let me just check and review our midterm examination and explain a few of the critical items in the test. So if you guys have questions or any other concern about our test, please don't hold back. I encourage everyone to just post them on our GC, or you can also route them to me via private message. Alright, so let's begin. So this is our midterm examination for English 10, speech and oral communication. As you can remember, it was a 28 item test. So 75% of 28 is 21, right? So for you to pass our midterm, you have to get a score of 21 and above. So if your score is below 21, that means you failed the midterm examination. So let me go ahead and proceed to the first item here. Here, question number 1. Let me just zoom in for you guys to see the items clearly. So, number 1. Communication as defined refers to the act of giving, receiving, or exchanging information, ideas, and opinions so that the message is completely understood by both parties. The following are essential communication. The following are essential in communication, except. So we all know that the sender and the receiver play a critical role in communication, right? So what we're looking here is this one, except. So the answer is letter C, speaking proficiency. All right, so moving on, question number 2. The following statements are true about communication, except. Again, please note of this word, except. So here for option A, in a communication process, there must be a sender who speaks or sends a message and a receiver who listens or receives the message. So this statement is obviously true about communication. So this is not the correct answer for number 2. Letter B, the receiver of the message tries to understand and interpret the message sent. So this is also true when it comes to communication. Here is the answer, letter C. What makes this statement incorrect about communication is this one, the last statement here. This signals the end of the communication process. Alright, so question number 3. The following are identified barriers to effective communication, except. The answer here is letter C. Since we all know that grammar is very important in spoken English, so with pronunciation. So when a person doesn't know anything about grammar, or when he or she is not, good at pronunciation, that will lead to, what do you think? That leads to miscommunication. Absolutely correct. Number 4, which of the following statements here is not correct? The answer is B. The length of the message also does not affect the communication process. You can read this one, this item, number 4 and number 5. Just make use of the self-learning module or material which I sent on Google Classroom. Moving forward for number 5, which of the following statements here is true? The answer is letter C. Whether the receiver is known or unknown to you always plays a major role in determining the effectiveness of your communication. Alright, number 6. A well-written piece of work requires one person to pay attention to the following key stages in the writing process. We all know that writing itself involves stages, right? And these are the stages: planning, writing, and last here is editing. So the answer is letter C. Number 7, to write a good report, you need to plan what you want to say. After you have decided on what you want to say, list down all the points and arrange them in a logical and suitable sequence. This approach will ensure the clarity of your message and help you to avoid uh, omitting relevant details. This relates to, of course, planning. Letter A. Number 8. This stage in the writing process is crucial in order to check for grammatical errors. The answer here is obviously revising. Number 9. There are pitfalls to avoid in effective writing. Which of the following statements does not belong to the group? The answer is letter C. Here, in order to get messages conveyed effectively, you must understand what your message is, who you are sending it to, and how it will be perceived. Sometimes people may not respond to your communication for the following reasons, except the answer here is letter C. So that means all the items here are correct. Or I mean, all the options here are the reasons or the acceptable reasons. Right, number 11. Which of the following statements is incorrect? The answer is A. So that means B and C here are correct statements. So what we're looking here is the incorrect statement. So letter A. There are two important stages to producing good written communication, planning and writing. So it lacks what? It lacks revising. Alright, for number 12, this refers to the process of using the sense of hearing in order for the person to know what is happening around him. The answer is listening. Number 13, the process of conveying a message to a receiver verbally, or a process where the listener applies to him or herself the information he or she has heard. Obviously, this one is speaking. Number 14, it is the process of analyzing symbols for you to understand the message conveyed by the sender. Of course, that's reading. Next, number 15, the last and probably the most complex skill. This is writing. Number 16, the following items are the types of listening, except we all know that competitive is, a type of listening, so with passive. So the answer here is argumentative. This one. 17. Listening is the process of receiving spoken language using the ears. Which of the following statements is true? The answer is A. Listening is a skill, which is really, really true, while hearing is the ability. Number 18. The following are the major differences between American and British English, except this one. Letter C is the correct answer. We all know that American English and British English differs in vocabulary and spelling. Number 19. British and American English differ in various ways. Which of the following analogy pairs is incorrect? So the answer is letter C. Truck for American English. So to make this pair correct, the second word here is supposedly lorry. Number 20. It is easy to spot the differences between American and British English, especially in the spoken aspect. Which of the following is not true? When we think of letter A, the letter T in the word water is a soft D sound in American English. This one is correct. Next letter B, the letter R in the British English is sometimes dropped. This is also correct statement. So here, letter C is the answer. American and British English have no differences in terms of vocabulary usage. There is a difference between BRE and AME when it comes to usage or vocabulary. Next, number 21. Which of the following options has a long E sound? The answer is bean, letter B. Number 22. Which of the following words is misspelled? receive is spelled correctly. So with receipt, a cappella. A cappella is two words. 23. The following words have the a sound except. What is the answer? Bank, bank, short, fart. What do you think is the answer? The following words have the a sound except bank, bank, short, fart. This one is a bonus. There's something wrong here in this item. So 23 here is a bonus. Again, we're looking for a word that is not an a sound. So there seems to be a problem with the options here. So again, 23 is a bonus item. Number 24. Okay, for number 24, which of the following statements is not correct? Again, which of the following statements here is not correct? Option A, the independent clause expresses a complete thought and can stand by itself as a sentence. This one is correct, right? The letter C, a dependent clause is not a complete sentence. It must be connected to an independent clause. So this one is also a correct statement. The answer is B. Clauses and phrases are two terms which can be used interchangeably. So what makes this statement incorrect? This one, this phrase here can be used interchangeably. We all know that a clause is different from a phrase. So when we think of clauses, they are group of words with a subject and a verb, right? And phrases are just merely group of words without sense, without a subject, without a verb. All right, number 25. In English, there are four kinds of sentences according to structure. First one is simple, second is compound, third is complex, and fourth, compound complex. The different patterns are categorized according to various combinations of independent and dependent clauses. The following are examples of compound sentences, except, of course, the answer is letter A. This one is A. It's not a compound sentence. This one is a complex sentence. We have here one dependent clause. When he finishes university, Tim hopes to move to British Columbia. This one is the independent clause. So this one is not a compound sentence. This one is a complex sentence. Number 26. Let me just scroll down. Number 26. A simple sentence consists of one independent clause. The following are sample sentences, except we all know that A and B are simple sentences. This one is very simple. And letter C here is Mary went to work, but John went to the party is a compound sentence. Alright, so moving forward to number 27. A compound sentence is two or more independent clauses joined by a conjunction or a semicolon. Each of these clauses could form a sentence alone. There seems to be a problem here in item number 27. It is, incomplete. The guide question here is vague. So this one is another bonus item. So all in all, we have two bonus items in this test. So last here, item number 28. Which of the following statements here is true? We all know that C here is incorrect or not true because we all know that dependent clauses cannot stand by its own, right? Only independent clauses. And B here, a phrase is a group of words. It's merely a group of words without a subject and a verb. So these two here are incorrect statements. So A is the answer. All right, I think we're good, and I believe we're now ready to explore brand new topics today. So let me just go ahead and show you guys our lesson objectives of the day here. So at the end of the lesson, our students are expected to first identify the different elements of communication. Second, explain the communication process. Third, familiarize the different models of communication. Next is compare and contrast the different models. Fifth, identify and classify the common communication barriers. And last, point out how to overcome them to become an effective communicator. Now, what to expect? Here, in this video lesson, in this recorded lesson, I've downloaded supplementary resources from, educational channels in YouTube uh, for us to explore and for you, my students, to learn more. It's really different when, when someone who is a native speaker is discussing a critical point in English, which is for me very compelling and also very effective. Next here, uh, everyone is expected to listen closely to learn about follow-up activities in some of the slides. So you may go back or you may hit that rewind button for you to review or for you to, for further questions or to clarify things out and for your own understanding. So you may go back or hit that rewind button. And last here, as usual, follow-up activities will be posted uh, on Google Classroom. Alright, so in our previous lessons, we learned that communication process refers to a series of actions or steps taken for one person to successfully communicate. We also learned then in our past or previous discussions that our communication process involved several components such as the sender of the communication or the sender of the message, the actual message being sent, the encoding of the message, the receiver, and the decoding of the message. So in here, in the following slide, I'm going to play a video which I downloaded from Greg Learning, where the speaker himself talks about the communication process in detail. So I'm inviting everyone to watch very closely, listen very carefully, and take down important points.
Communication is the process of transmitting information from one person to another to create a shared understanding and feeling. The word communication actually comes from the Latin word communicare, meaning to share or make common. Communication does not mean agreeing, only that information is transmitted and received as it was intended. This figure illustrates the communication process. Encoding occurs when the message sender converts a thought, idea, or fact into a message comprised of symbols, pictures, or words. The message is the encoded information being sent. The channel is the medium used to send the message to the receiver, including voice, writing, graphs, videos, intranets, television, body language, and so on. When the message receiver sees, reads, or hears the message, it gets decoded. Decoding is the interpretation and translation of the message back into something understood by the receiver. The decoded information is hopefully the same as the information the sender intended to communicate, but that's not always the case. Feedback is a check on the success of the communication. The message receiver sends a new message back to the original sender, and the original sender assesses to see if the receiver understood the original message as intended. Repeating or paraphrasing the original message, asking for clarification, or asking if your conclusions are correct are forms of feedback. Noise is anything that blocks, distorts, or changes in any way the message the sender intended to communicate. In other words, in the communication process, the sender translates, encodes information into words, symbols, or pictures, and passes it to the receiver through some medium or channel. The sender then receives the message and retranslates, decodes it into a message that's hopefully the same as what the sender intended. Noise can enter anywhere in the process, making the message received different from the one the sender intended. Feedback creates two-way communication that helps to check on the success of the communication and ensure that the receiver's message was accurate. Unfortunately, though, problems can arise at any point during the communication process that make the message ultimately received different from the one sent. These barriers can come from the sender, or the receiver, or the organization, or noise.
Alright, so I'm hoping that the video presented helped everyone better understand the communication process. I believe that it was properly presented or it was effectively presented by Greg Learning. I hope you enjoyed it as well as much as I do. Now, let's proceed with the models of communication. This is a very important topic for everyone to master or for everyone to learn or to familiarize. So, what are these? What are these models of communication? These are just conceptual models used to explain human communication process. So again, these are just conceptual models. Again, these are just conceptual models used to explain the human communication process. And when we think of models of communication, we're talking about three models. First one here is linear communication model, interactive communication model, and last here is transactional communication model. Again, linear communication model is the first. Second is interactive communication model. Third is transactional communication model. Now, under the first communication model, as you can see here, there are three types of linear communication model. First one is Laswell's model, second one is Aristotle's model, and third is Berlow's SMCR. For interactive communication model, there's Scram's model, there's White's model, right? And last, for transactional communication model, there's Berland's model and Shannon and Weaver model. Now, I'm not going to discuss each one here, so I'll just leave all these uh, types to you as your assignment. So it's all up to you to find out. So that is your assignment. Again, research more about all these types of uh, linear communication model as well as these two types of interactive communication model, and third, these two transactional communication model. Now let me go ahead. All right, so first things first, let me talk what linear communication is all about. So when we think of linear model of communication, this explains the process of one-way communication, whereby a sender transmits a message and a receiver observes it. It's a straightforward communication model that is used across businesses to assist with customer communication driven activities. So one of its features here, no feedback. Senders send the message and receivers only receive. So that's basically what linear model of communication is all about. So what are the advantages or what are its advantages or pros? Here first is good at audience persuasion and propaganda setting. Then second here is intentional results. So the cons or the negative effects here. First is communication is not continuous. We all know that it's a one-way communication process. So communication is not continuous as no concept of feedback. And here, no way to know if communication was effective. So that's basically the disadvantage. The disadvantage of this type of communication model. Alright, so for the remaining two communication models, in here I'll be showing to you two videos. The first one is a discussion about the interactive communication model, and the second one is also a discussion about the transactional communication model. So have your pen and paper ready for note taking. So thank you very much, and please watch very closely, listen very carefully for you guys to be able to take notes correctly.
Okay, so the second model that we're going to be discussing is something called the interactive model. Now, the linear model was one-way communication. So the interactive model is two-way communication. And the linear model, like we discussed on the announcements, you send a message, somebody receives it, and that's where it's over. In the interactive model, it's a little bit different. We are still going to have our sender, and we are still going to have our receiver. Our sender is still going to have to encode a message. They have to create messages. And our receiver is going to have to create some meaning by decoding the message. Now, in two-way communication, the message does initially travel from sender to receiver. And we still, just like in every single other model, are going to have noise. Now again, noise can be everything from you physically not being able to hear the speaker, or maybe you send a text message and it gets stuck somewhere because you lose your service, or it could be I'm sitting in class after lunch, I'm hungry because I didn't get to eat lunch, and now I can't focus on the lecture. All of those are things that get in the way of communication. Noise isn't just what you hear, it's what you're feeling, it's what you're thinking. So in this case, I have a sender, I have a receiver, they sent a message. Now though, my receiver is going to be able to respond. You will notice that I have two different arrows for channel. That's because in the interactive model, the channels do not have to be the same. I can shoot you an email, you can read it, and you can respond with a text message. Does that make sense? I can send you something through Google Classroom, you can read it, and you can respond through Remind. Even though we're going back and forth, it doesn't have to be the same channel. Now, if my receiver is now able to send a message back, they also become a sender, which means that they now also must encode. Similarly here, the sender now becomes a receiver, and they also must decode. Here's something that kids usually get wrong when I'm explaining this. The interactive model does not represent face-to-face communication, because in this model, I send a message, you receive it, you think about it, and I don't get to see your response until you're ready to shoot it back. In face-to-face communication, whether you mean to or not, you're constantly sending messages through your facial features, through the way you stand. In the interactive model, you don't get any of that feedback. You send something, you wait, you get something back. So I want you to take 30 seconds to see if you can think of any examples in real life of the interactive model.
Transactional means that something is going in between. So here's one person, and we're going to draw our other person. So first, this person can be identified as the sender, right? So the sender is going to send a message to who we will call the receiver. Now, once the sender sends the message to the receiver has to do something with that message. They have to decode. So the receiver decodes the message. Which means that the sender had to encode the message. So once the receiver receives the message and decodes it, they then encode a new message and send it back to the receiver. So in fact, our receiver decoder can become a sender encoder. That's important. And thus making the sender encoder a receiver decoder. Now, what they're sending are messages. Some messages, we'll just say right here, this encoder is speaking. And this initial receiver is listening. However, the receiver can send information back even non-verbally. So let's say this receiver is listening and doesn't quite understand what the sender is saying. Once the receiver decodes the message and offers, like says they're confused, it will show in their face. And so the message that is being received is a nonverbal communicative message. So we want to put right here, message. Now sometimes, especially in public speaking, we can be interrupted. We can be interrupted by someone coughing. We could be interrupted by a person who doesn't understand what you're saying. Anything that creates a distraction is called noise. You can hear noise outside the classroom, or somebody could sneeze, right? Just say sneeze, and that can be noise. Also, if the room is too hot, if it's too cold, if the speaker, the sender, is wearing something really loud and obnoxious or just not that awesome, all of those things are a noise, and noise can interfere with the messages that we're sending, receiving, decoding, and encoding. Also, you want to think about messages as transferable through channels. So one channel for the public speaker is the voice, right? So his channel is audio. And the receiver's channel is also audio, but it's not the spoken word, it's the hearing, right? So they are hearing the message. And we know with spoken word that it is meant to be heard. If the receiver is non-hearing, then the message they receive will be decoded by another person. So if you have a deaf member in the audience, then the deaf member will have an assistant who is decoding the message for that receiver or the non-hearing receivers. That's your basic transactional model.
All right, so I would like to thank everybody for for watching the videos presented very seriously. So we are now, as you can see on your screen, we are now on activity number 1, which is a video response. Of course, this is relative to the videos presented, which were about the different models of communication. So as you can see, there's a guide here. Record a video at least 2 minutes, summarizing or paraphrasing the key points mentioned in the previous slide. So you have to cite examples to each communication model. When done, upload the said video at our GC after watching this entire video lesson. Again, record a video that needs to be at least 2 minutes, summarizing and paraphrasing the key points mentioned in the previous slides, which were about the different models of communication. So you also need to cite examples to each model. Then when done, upload the said video at our GC right after watching this video lesson. So that's a requirement. So I hope that is clear. And right now, for us to better understand the different barriers to effective communication and also learn a few techniques and how to overcome them, let us watch a video from Leadership Communication Skills to learn more.
So in the first group of three, we're going to talk about barriers that involve words. So the first one is language use. So one of the ways that we get caught up on language and misunderstand each other is because we're being too technical. A lot of times we have an area of expertise that we've learned a lot about and we're quite good at. And if we use that overly technical vocabulary, all that jargon with people, it can cause a real barrier. So we have to remember to speak in everyday language, plain English, as I like to say, to connect with people in a more natural way. At the other end of the spectrum, sometimes we are much too abstract. We're talking in vague, ambiguous terms, and that can cause a barrier as well. And in those cases, you might have to be just a little bit more detailed in what you're talking about so people can connect with it. The next way we use words that can cause a barrier is the way we organize our words. So if you're talking in a stream of consciousness, rambling, disorganized way, it's going to be very hard for people to follow what you're talking about. So instead, what you want to do is give an orderly presentation of ideas. Let's say you're in a conversation or a meeting. You want to give some main points and stick to your message. Be clear and concise, in other words. And the third way that words can become a barrier is information overload. If you're on the other end of this, you know what I'm talking about. Someone's talking at you for an extended period of time and it just gets overwhelming. It's very hard to keep track of everything they're saying. And so you don't want to be this person on your end of the conversation. You want to take lots of talking turns, take short talking turns and bounce the conversation back and forth. There's lots of checking in a back and forth pattern of conversation, much more opportunity to clarify if anything needs to be clarified. So those are the three ways that we get barriers and experience barriers around words. We'll turn now to people's background. And the first one is our attitudinal differences. So we were raised a certain way, we have a whole set of life experiences, and a lot of times we might have a bias toward a person or a topic. So as soon as they bring up a particular topic and start talking about it, we might have a resistance to that, and that can cause a big barrier. We might have a lack of interest, we might be preoccupied. These attitudinal differences based upon all of the opinions we've had up to this point in our lives can become a barrier. So we have to make sure we don't tune out as soon as they bring something up that we don't care as much about. Another area of our background is our demographic background. So if we're a certain age, we come from a certain culture or gender or status background, all of these are filters. Not really, like my age is not necessarily a filter, but because I came from a certain generation, I might see what you're talking about a certain way. I might care about some things more than others. So those demographic background cues can signal a kind of attitudinal difference that I might have toward a topic. So you might have a lot of trouble relating to someone who's 40 or 50 years older than you, and that might be obvious, but sometimes even a difference of 10 or 20 years in the workplace or between a man and a woman, the differences can be a little bit exaggerated, or if I'm from one culture and you're from another. We develop a common sense based upon our background that can become a barrier. And the third area under our background barriers are our triggers and filters. So you have a common sense that you've developed your whole life about the way you see the world, and if you hear something the wrong way, the other person might not have meant it that way, but maybe you heard it that way through your filter. They might have pushed your hot button and now you're upset, you're seeing red about a particular topic, and that comes from your background. You came up a certain way and they might be quite innocently and genuinely talking about something, but you heard it another way. So keep in mind that you have filters and triggers that could be affecting this that come from your background. So those are the different ways our background can influence us. Let's look at the next group of three, and these all have to do with what I call physical barriers. So the first and most obvious one is the physical distance that we often have now in professional settings. We do a lot of our work on email, or we're texting or online, and so that physical distance can become a barrier because we're losing a lot of the nonverbal cues. If you can't see someone's face and you're not face to face, you might misunderstand the other person or not really get the humor that they might be using, or a warmth that could come across in face-to-face conversations, not really communicated once you have that physical distance and you're using technology. Another area of physical barrier could be the noise. So maybe you're in a noisy physical environment and that's causing a barrier. Sometimes there's noise in the communication system that you are using. So your messages are getting garbled or are not making sense. That can also cause some problems. And the last physical barrier is what I'm calling it a physical barrier because I don't have a better way to describe it. Sometimes our physical ears don't work so well. For example, you might have a hearing impairment. I know a lot of people that have hearing impairments, and that can cause a barrier in communication. In fact, I personally have a hearing impairment in my left ear. Causes me a lot of trouble, and so when I'm talking to people, I'll normally have to look right at them and focus so I can hear the best way I can and really see what they're saying as well. Another physical barrier is sometimes we come from a different place, and so over time we have a different language that's part of us, and maybe the other person is not speaking the same language when they were growing up. So now we're both speaking English, but there's that physical mind difference that I might literally hear your words differently because you're speaking with a different accent, a different rate of speech. And it's not that I'm not listening to you and paying attention, I care, but physically I can't necessarily keep up because my ear is not tuned in and my mind is not as sharp on that particular type of language. Now, if I were trying to speak your language, I would be having a lot of trouble too. But in a conversation, this becomes a barrier for both people involved, no matter what language you're speaking. So you have to realize this and be much more patient in a situation like this.
Alright, so to recap the key points mentioned by the speaker on the video, we know that he talked about 9 common barriers to effective communication, right? And we also know that a communication barrier is anything or just refers to anything that prevents us from getting clear information, or it's something that hinders us from getting the right information. So that's basically what a communication barrier is. So another question, how to overcome them? Okay, how do we overcome a communication barrier? It's simple. We just have to always stay focused. Again, the key here is always to stay focused. Alright, so before we end this video, let me just show to you guys what we have accomplished in this, in this video lesson. First, we've gone in depth about the communication process. We also tackled in depth the 3 communication models, as well as the different barriers to effective communication. And in here, I'd like to thank everyone for for spending your time with me today, and keep safe everyone, and you all have a great day. Thank you very much.